Hello guys and welcome back to our channel. Now in this video, Professor Richard Wolff's expertise shines through as he presents a logical and thought-provoking solution for the inevitable decline of the American empire. As he astutely points out, empires, like any living entity, have a life cycle. They rise, flourish, and eventually shrink. The American empire is no exception, and he warns that denial, currently the predominant response, is not a viable solution. Now, the decline of the dollar coupled with the failures in Ukraine, Afghanistan, and Iraq are all indicators of the empire's downward trajectory. His assertion that you can dance around it in 20 different ways, but it is the truth, serves as a reminder that ignoring these signs won't make them disappear. Now, as we take a look into Professor Wolff's insightful analysis, it becomes very clear that the American empire's demise is not a matter of if, but when. So with that said, let's take a look at this video and make sure to watch the entire video. I will be right back.
This is part of something Americans have not yet wrapped their heads around. The American empire, like every empire before it, is now shrinking. You know, empires rise, they have a flourish, they grow, it's very impressive, and at their peak, they can't imagine that it won't last forever. It never has. Every empire, the Greek, the Roman, the Persian, the Turkish, you fill in the blank, they all went up, and then they went down. The ride up, much more fun than the ride down. We are now in the ride down, and we better be very careful because denial, which is the way most of America is so far dealing with it, is not a solution. It doesn't go away because you pretend it isn't happening. The dollar's decline is a literal barometer week in and week out of what we're seeing. The failure in Ukraine is another one. I mean, you've got to see, we didn't win in Vietnam. We didn't win in Afghanistan. We didn't win in Iraq. You can dance around it 20 different ways, but it is the truth. This is not an argument about who's the good guys and the bad guys. I'm just explaining we are not facing a decline that is underway and that is showing us its face if only we're willing to see it. And we could have a, quote, decent soft landing. Empires do not have to go out in a horrible explosion. They can decline. Britain, not that they're a model, but after trying twice to stop the United States in the War of Independence and again the War of 1812, the British figured out we can't do this militarily, and they came to terms with their decline and being replaced by the American empire. I don't know what's coming next. I don't know whether the Chinese will be the next empire or whether it'll be handled in a multinational way. And there's some evidence in both directions. But the United States is not able to do what it did. And one of the greatest mistakes empires in the past have made is overreaching when they can't do that anymore. And my fear is we're at a very delicate point in that process, hampered by a denial of what's going on that periodically frightens me.
So if our politicians could get out of the state of denial and face reality, what would that look like? What would this soft landing that you just described look like?
They would have to sit down at this point, either with China or with China and what we call the BRICS, this group of nations that are really working well together. China, India, Brazil, South Africa, Russia. I left out Russia, right. And there's a dozen other countries that have applied. So they're going to become much, much bigger in the next 12 to 24 months. You'd have to sit down with them and work out a live and let live arrangement. You know, the world needs a lot of things produced. Americans can produce some of them, Chinese can produce, and Brazilian. We'd have a much better world if it were more generously distributed. It shouldn't all be in North America and Western Europe. That's a legacy of colonialism we should better put behind us. If more of the different parts of the world really are integrated, they'll be less likely to be tempted to do militarily what they really can't afford. That's already underway. We might have done terrible things vis-a-vis China if we weren't as dependent on the Chinese as we already are. Look, from the time that Kissinger and Nixon went to China and reestablished relations with them several decades ago, until 10 years ago, the United States and China were helping each other. We're trading a lot. That's when a lot of American companies invested in China, et cetera, et cetera. We were able to live together. Those were years of great prosperity in the United States and great economic growth in China. My feeling is, look, we have much to gain and we can avoid a terrible loss. A war? Are we serious? Are we going to have a war around Taiwan, in China, in the South China Sea, at the same time that we're fighting a war in Europe? Really? With countries that all have nuclear weapons? This is crazy. We can't afford to do it, and we ought to stop trying. The wealth of the United States is a great incentive for other countries to meet us halfway. Let's use the wealth to have an attempt at least. Even if we fail, it's worth the effort to try to do this rather than the saber rattling that's scaring everybody in the world and not bringing the United States out of its decline. Its decline continues. You rattle your sword against Russia and China, the situation of the United States has not gotten better. The United States is more isolated now than it was 5 years ago. Russia is not the pariah nation that the United States and Western Europe would like to claim it to be. I'm not arguing whether it's right or wrong.
Sure.
I'm not
It's not a moral argument.
Or any of that. What I'm saying is, let's be honest and look at the situation the way it is. We are fighting to the last Ukrainian, and I don't think that's a smart move at all.
Now, the evidence suggests that empires often react to periods of their own decline by overextending their coping mechanisms. Military actions, infrastructure problems, and social welfare demands may then combine or clash, accumulating costs and backlash effects that the declining empire cannot manage. Now, policies aimed to strengthen empire and that once did now undermine it. Contemporary social changes inside and outside the empire can reinforce, slow, or reverse the decline. However, when decline leads leaders to deny its existence, it can become self-accelerating. In empire's early years, leaders and the led may repress those among them who stress or merely even mention decline. Social problems may likewise be denied, minimized, or if admitted, blamed on convenient scapegoats like immigrants, foreign powers, or ethnic minorities, rather than linked to imperial decline. Now, the US empire, audaciously proclaimed by the Monroe Doctrine soon after 2 independence wars won against Britain, grew across the 19th and 20th centuries and peaked during the decades between 1945 and 2010. Now, the rise of the US empire overlapped with the decline of the British Empire. The Soviet Union represented limited political and military challenges, but never any serious economic competition or threat. The Cold War was a lopsided contest whose outcome was programmed in from its beginning. All of the US empire's potential economic competitors or threats were devastated by World War II. Now, the following years found Europe losing its colonies. The unique global position of the United States then, with its disproportionate position in world trade and investment, was anomalous and likely unsustainable. An attitude of denial at the time that decline was all but certain morphed only too readily into the attitude of denial now that the decline is well underway. Now, the United States could not prevail militarily over all of Korea in its 1950 to 53 war there. The United States lost its subsequent wars in Vietnam, Afghanistan, and Iraq. The NATO alliance was insufficient to alter any of those outcomes. US military and financial support for Ukraine and the massive United States and NATO sanctions war against Russia are failures to date and are likely to remain so. Now, US sanctions programs against Cuba, Iran, and China have failed too. Meanwhile, the BRICS alliance contracts US policies to protect its empire, including its sanctions warfare with increasing effectiveness. In the realms of trade, investment, and finance, we can measure the decline of the US empire differently. One index is the decline of the US dollar as a central bank reserve holding. Another is its decline as a means of trade, loans, and investment. Finally, consider the US dollar's decline alongside that of dollar-denominated assets as intentionally desired means of holding wealth. Across the global south, countries, industries, or firms seeking trade, loans, or investments used to go to London, Washington, or Paris for decades. They now have other options. They can go instead to Beijing, New Delhi, or Moscow, where they can often secure more attractive terms. Empire confers special advantages that translate into extraordinary profits for firms located in the country that dominates the empire. The 19th century was remarkable for its endless confrontations and struggles among empires competing for territory to dominate and thus for their industries higher profits. Now, declines of any one empire could enhance opportunities for competing empires. If the latter grabbed those opportunities, the former's decline could worsen. One set of competing empires delivered 2 world wars in the last century. Another set seems increasingly driven to deliver worse, possibly nuclear world wars in this country. Now, before World War I, theories speculated that the evolution of multinational corporations out of merely national mega corporations would end or reduce the risks of war. Owners and directors of increasingly global corporations would work against war among countries as a logical extension of their profit-maximizing strategies. The centuries' 2 world wars undermined those theories' appearance of truth. So too did the fact that multinational megacorporations increasingly purchased governments and subordinated state policies to those corporations' competing growth strategies. Capitalist competition governed state policies at least as much as the reverse. Out of their interaction emerged the wars of the 21st century in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Ukraine, and Gaza. Likewise, from their interaction, rising US-China tensions emerged around Taiwan and the South China Sea. Now, China presents a unique analytical problem. The private capitalist half of its hybrid economic system exhibits growth imperatives parallel to those agitating economies where 90 to 100% of enterprises are private capitalists in organization. The state-owned and operated enterprises comprising the other half of China's economy exhibit different drives and motivations. Profit is less their bottom line than it is for private capitalist enterprises. Similarly, the Communist Party's rule over the state, including the state's regulation of the entire Chinese economy, introduces other objectives besides profit, ones that also govern enterprise decisions. Since China and its major economic allies, BRICS, comprise the entity now competing with the declining US empire and its major economic allies, G7, China's uniqueness may yield an outcome different from past clashes of empires. Now, Professor Richard Wolff's words are a reminder of the reality America faces today. His assertion that America's empire is shrinking and that denial is not a solution is a truth that's hard to swallow but impossible to ignore. For too long, America has been living in a state of denial, refusing to acknowledge the decline of its empire, but the signs are all there. The decline of the dollar, the failures in Ukraine, Afghanistan, and Iraq, and the growing inequality and social unrest at home. Now, Professor Wolff's expertise shines through as he lays bare the reality of America's situation. His message is very clear. Denial is not a solution, and it's time for America to come out of its state of denial and accept the truth. It's time for America to acknowledge that its empire is shrinking and that it's not the invisible power it once thought it was. It's time to confront the reality of its own vulnerabilities and to start working towards a smoother, more peaceful decline. We have finally come to the end of the video, but what do you, our viewers, have to say? Share your thoughts, your contributions as well in the comment section. Thank you for always watching and see you in our next video as we bring you another interesting video.